Our world continues to change and push us in ways we have not been challenged before. On this show, we talk about these challenges, how to be aware of them, face them, and overcome them in your life. This is David Waldas, creator of the Aligned Living System.
And I'm Nick Musica, Aligned Living Coach. Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Aligned Living System podcast. This is David Waldas here with Nick Musica. Today we're actually trying a new platform out. This is Riverside that we're on. I was a guest on a podcast not too long ago, and the audio and video quality was a whole different level. So we decided to up-level it ourselves. So hopefully this will show up here more clear and more clear. So today's topic is we're going to dive into Nick's world a little bit. We're going to look at animal communication and really what does it have to do with aligned living? What does it have to do with personal development? And, you know, what are his experiences? Because so many people reach out to him for animal communication, and the animals often want to talk about their people. So welcome, Nick.
Good morning, David.
Yeah. So what's up with that? Why are the animals... I mean, you can go wherever you want to, but it's interesting, right? The animals get on and the people want to talk about their animals and the animals want to talk about their people.
Yeah. I mean, so most people come to me with a 3D problem with their cat, dog. That's the typical scenario. Mm-hmm. And they'll come because their dog doesn't want to go out to pee at night, or the dog's biting people. There's some type of typically behavioral problem. And that sometimes there's information around that, but more frequently the dog will show that they're reflecting the behavior of the human in some way. So
that's often the situation I get when people want to refer their good friends or their spouses after they work with me.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's maybe it's a coping mechanism that we all have. Like it's a deflection of. We were talking about this a little bit before we started to record, of deflection of or lack of taking care of self or something, mm-hmm. or maybe putting someone else in front of me because I feel like that's the right thing to do, or a combination of those things. I mean, I don't know why. I have no idea. But the result typically is I want to talk about my cat, my dog, mm-hmm. and the reality of the situation. Right? That's very 3D. We were talking about 3D and 4D as well before we started to record. Like, that's a very 3D perspective. Mm-hmm. But then 4D from the, getting into higher self and that type of conversation, where that's really leading the charge of our daily interactions on the 3D and giving it meaning mm-hmm. and purpose. That's where the conversations go. So while the behaviors in the 3D, the information is coming from the 4D about the 3D. So what that means is, so for example, like there was a woman who came to me and said, my dog doesn't want to go out at night. Okay, well, walk me through it. Well, I have my pajamas on, and it's 9:00 at night, and I call the dog over. I open the door, and I tell the dog to go outside, and the dog just sits there and looks at me. I said, well, how do you feel about going outside? She said, well, I'm afraid of it. Mm-hmm. But it's okay for the dog to go outside and pee. Well, what do you mean? Well, and we got into some of the basics of communication, of how you communicate to the dog. But the bigger conversation there, outside of how to communicate to this little dog in 3D, was, well, you're asking of this little being to do things that you're afraid of doing for yourself. Right. So the conversation started, we started to just sort of muddle our way into things that I'm afraid of type of thing.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I mean, the way that I think about it very broadly is there's so many tools available to us to help us take care of ourselves. And it could be yoga, it could be the food we eat. It's a yes and to all these things, right? It's the yoga, it's the food we eat, it's getting outside for a walk, it's being with the trees, it's being in silence, and also the animals. Everything here is to support us.
Right.
If only we allowed it to, which mm-hmm. is sort of a little bit of that. But if I put something in front of me and take care of that, I get to not take care of myself. Well, that's mm-hmm. cool. Mm-hmm. Sure, that'll work for some period of time, but then reality is going to catch up to you.
Yeah, it's like proxy self-care, but you're caring for
Yeah.
something else instead of yourself.
Yeah. Caring for yourself in the name of caring for something else. Like, but that's you can see how that doesn't work, right? Like, but it does because that makes you feel good. But you're really not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I was just seeing this image of like brushing your kid's hair and expecting your hair to be brushed when you're done brushing their hair, brushing your dog, and
Yeah,
expecting your hair to be brushed by the time you're done. It
man.
didn't
Yeah,
change
I mean,
anything here. Yeah.
yeah. Well, what's the phrase, right? They like the shoemaker's kids have no shoes type of thing,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it's a little bit like that.
I
Yeah.
think the more sophisticated was the cobbler's kids have no shoes, right?
Oh, is that right? The language changed. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, so we have it's the animals are just one aspect of where help can come from, and it's also like to for someone to step away from that conversation after 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever that I have with them, where they start with a deep problem with dog and end with there's this mirroring aspect or modeling aspect of like, the dog not wanting to go out and then whatever else that dog may want to talk about. That's not from the 3D, right? And so then if you gave it any amount of thought at all, you'd go, so wait, this guy is talking to the consciousness of this animal. My dog has a consciousness? Oh, then what else has a consciousness, right? And so like it completely changes, and speaking for myself, it completely changes your view of what is
What you're
available on the
interacting with,
planet.
right?
Yeah. What and how you're interacting with. I mean, I saw something on Facebook the other day of when I look into the eyes of an animal, I don't see an animal, I see another soul, and that feels warm and fuzzy. But the reality of that is that's a very true statement, and it's not just seeing through the eyes. It's actually feeling that being. It's actually communicating with that being in a way that's more than, hey, you want to go out for a walk, or
Yeah, yeah.
something
Yeah,
like
well,
that.
something's really fascinating to me about that, right? That way animals come into our lives, and we've seen them come in for different reasons, right? Some of them are to teach us something, right?
Yeah.
There's some sort of a oppositional relationship with the animal. There's something that it's not about the animal connecting with you and helping you feel supported, but maybe there's like a resistance, that it's so interesting to me when I look at thinking back about different experiences I've had with different clients, with animals, or even myself or friends, and even allergies, right? Like being allergic to specific animals. That sometimes there's a rub with an animal. Sometimes there's something that the animal's asking you to resolve simply by being because it triggers us in some way.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because there's this connection and we're able to have this proxy care for ourselves by caring for another animal or for an animal instead of ourselves. And so that wide range, right, of the role that animals play in our lives, and that it's always about us helping us resolve something, right? Is that fair to say that sometimes they do it through upsetting us and sometimes they do it through comforting us? What's your
Yeah.
take on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's like there was a woman, I may mention her on one of our chats before, but she came to me, and she came to me because 3D problem. The 3D problem was her dog is biting people, right? And that was very upsetting to her. Right? She didn't like that. She couldn't have people over, and it was a little Chihuahua. And when I tuned into the little Chihuahua, the dog said, "You need to ask her about her job." And so I asked, "Why? Why am I asking her about her job? Because that's what has to change." Okay, all right. So I get on the line with this woman, and she says, "So did you talk to my dog?" And I go, "Yeah, I did." "And did you tell him to stop biting people?" I said, "No, I didn't." Well, what'd you talk about? What do you do for a living?" "I'm unemployed." "You're not unemployed. What do you do? What do you do for work right now?" "I'm a private driver, Ubers and limousines." "Okay. Well, how's that working out for you?" "Well, I have spinal issues, and my doctor tells me that I shouldn't even be driving the car because after about an hour or two, my back is all banged up." "Okay, well, here's what your dog said. Like, your job is what has to change. It's keeping you in this state of discomfort. It's making you angry. Like, there's nothing good coming out of the activities that you're doing for making money. And I get you got to pay your bills, but there's got to be a better way." And as we're talking, like the dog shows me these vases, and I said, "So what do you do with vases?" And she goes, well, I paint roses on them, then I give them away. And people put flowers in them. And so it was interesting how the contrast of this thing that was emotionally and physically painful and out of alignment was the reason for the supposed anger of the dog, right? The bad behavior. And then in contrast, this thing that really lights her up and makes her feel fulfilled showed up, right? So it's like, let's talk about why these two things are showing up.
Yeah.
And
who are you when you're doing the painting of the vases, and who are you when you're driving?
two totally different people, right? And so going back to like alignment, right? This is a way for the animals show me or tell me in one way or another, point the direction in terms of what is more alignment than not for folks. And then that leads to a happier, healthier, more enjoyable time on the planet. Tickles your soul a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like I'm just seeing this parallel. Before aligned living, when the external world just, had free access and just streamed into my inner world, and my inner world had free access and just streamed into the outer world, and there wasn't a sense of really locking in on myself and having that filter that says, no, this is me, that's the outer world. That really clear, strong, empathic experience that so many people that listen to this have, and that's what aligned living supports us with. For animals, that's often their experience, right? They're going through and they just have the sensitivity. That's why, a dog, you walk by a dog, and if you're angry, like they respond. If you're happy, they respond. They're experiencing the world through their person or through a person. And so, when people think about wanting to take care of their pets, this idea of because our pets feel us, like the only way we can really take care of our pets is by taking care of us, because they can't be comfortable until we're comfortable. And I don't really mean comfortable as in like I'll relax and chill, but like if we have this aggravation or this discomfort or this thing that we're working through,
that's true.
The animal's experiencing it. And so if we want to take care of our animal, like we have to take care of ourselves. And it's kind of like being a parent, but even to another degree, because of the massive sensitivity and the empathic ability of animals. Is that ring true for you?
Yeah, I think so. And I would also say there's a sliding scale, right? So on the way left hand, which is true for people and animals. So on the way left hand side is my reality is what the world sends to me, right? 100% empathic. Yeah. And on the way on the right hand side is my reality is me as the starting point, and I can recognize the things out there, but I choose to respond to them if I want to, because I have a sense of self energetically, versus way on the left hand side, it's all tangled, right? Yeah. It's one thing, and no one can distinguish it, right? And animals, I think, are similar. Like you have animals that are more impacted, and or they use that sensitivity to show as a tool, right? Because they'll show you problems. I went up to a holistic veterinarian conference a couple months ago, and they were talking about, I forget who I was talking to, but they were telling me about how one of their people a person came in with their dog, and the dog was having kidney issues, and the person ends up going to the vet or going to their doctor, getting their issues resolved. They go back to the vet a month, 2 months later, whatever it is, and there's no more kidney issues with the animal, right? So sometimes they'll use their bodies as part of the tool, right?
Yeah. How much do you think that is them using the bodies to communicate with us versus them taking on what we've taken on? And
yeah,
or is it both? Is it like there's a synchronicity there that?
I think so. I think it's the latter. I think there's I'm just trying to show you. I'm just trying to show you what's going on. Right? I would equate it back to it's just as relevant as a tool as the biting someone. Right. It just happens to be in the body, but they will they're here as teachers. They want us to learn the lessons, and sometimes, think about when you didn't learn the lesson, and the teacher's like, so here's what I want you guys to do. Again, also differently, to try to get this concept in your brains, right? Like there's a lot of fortitude and resilience on the teacher's part to try to teach it to the students. So there's that certainly happening. And way on the right-hand side is, there are, and I live with one of them, there are little beings who are higher level beings with higher states of consciousness, where some of the things we're saying are still true, but there's an aspect to them that is, it's higher consciousness.
It's deliberate, right? It's
Yeah. And as human beings walking around on the planet, we sort of think we're the bee's knees. We sort of think because we have credit cards and thumbs that we are the best thing walking around. And the truth from my experience, and we're just not. We're just not. It's the simple come from is just we are not.
We're the most distracted. Yeah, we're the most caught up in our ego of that.
We are the most academic, 100%. But in terms of being tuned into the other information other than what you find in the world of academia, no, we're largely lost.
Yeah, and it often takes us in a way that's hurts us, right?
Yeah,
it hurts the planet, hurts what's around us. Like, it's funny. I've often talked about that with clients that are very smart. Like we have to be able to overcome our own intelligence. We have to be able to overcome our own brains in order to be able to be in flow and in alignment, because that having such a strong tool, like it always wants to take charge.
Yeah.
And, animals are really good at overcoming that because it's a whole different experience for them.
Yeah. I mean, they see things as things are more so than we are. There's a great book. It was I think it was published in the 40s. The title is Kinship with All Life.
Yeah, I remember you recommended that to me. I read it. It was great.
Oh my God! Right, and the book is mostly about a dog called Strongheart that's dropped off on someone's doorstep in Hollywood, California. These producers who were the caretakers.
Dog.
Famous dog. These
dog.
Producers who had this dog and was in the movies. They drop it off at a friend's house and say, we need to go to New York to produce a play. Would you watch the dog? Well, how long? We don't know. We'll let you know. Okay. And he takes the dog on. And it's up until like chapter 2 where he's like, something's going on with this dog. It's weird. Like it feels like he's reading my mind. This is so strange. And he's recalling one day living in LA, sitting down at the desk in the typewriter because of the 40s. And he's looking outside, and it's a beautiful day, and he's having this deliberation with himself. Do I go outside and hike? Do I stay and work? Do I go outside and hike? Do I stay and work? And he goes, I'm going to go hike. And the dog rips through into his room with one hiking shoe, and then another hiking shoe, right? And then the belt and the pant, like all the things he would use for hiking, right?
Yeah.
And he realizes at that point, oh, there is something strange with this dog.
He's reading my mind.
He's reading my mind. He's picking up my intention, right? And so there's more stories of this dog picking up his intention throughout the book. He brings him to a lawyer's office, and the dog attacks a lawyer. And he's like, oh, shit, I'm going to get sued by the lawyers, right?
Don't attack a lawyer.
And it turns out the guy was embezzling money.
Yeah.
Right? Like he sees beyond the clothing. He sees beyond the artificial smile. And the bad intentions that are, painted as good. Yeah. And so they do that all the time. So when this woman showed up for me and said, but I want the dog to go outside, and it doesn't. Well, because you're afraid of going out
outside,
there.
Lady.
Yeah. The dog's like, it's not good for you, but it's good for me. I'm staying. I'm gonna stay right here. Right. So it's so obvious when that happens. Once you see it happening, and it's way easier to see it in someone else's animal than certainly your own, for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, when you look at that, so I know you've talked a lot about, as this opens up for people, and people bring their dog to you or their cat or whatever, their bird, that it often comes about their own personal development or their own aspects of themselves.
Yeah.
How often do people seem to be open to that? Do people seem to be like, oh, I'm so glad that my animal brought me here so that I can do my own personal development? Or how often is it like, yeah, let's go back and talk about my animal again. Let's make that about them, not me.
Yeah, the framing that I give in the beginning of the talk I found to be very important. Where here's what typically happens, and people bring their dog to me for a 3D problem, but typically the conversation shifts to about you, because the animal's here to support you. And so I try to give folks that baseline of where this may go, and then go in and typically say something like, and that's what we have here, right? So it starts to steer the conversation, and then they start to recategorize the information that I'm giving them for reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting. It made me. I think saw like a sticker for like a animal rescue, and it was like, "Who rescued who?" Something along those lines, right? And that's
a fantastic way to think about it. Yeah. And for what I try to get across to folks is, I mean, this always wasn't a thing for me, and some version of this can be a thing for you. I mean, I don't know if you can talk to animals. I don't know if you can talk to plants. There's people who do that too, or whatever other thing that has a consciousness out there, a life force out there. But from the perspective of personal development, if you can start to develop your own connection with something that's other than things you interact with in the 3D, right? And can start to see those things as just not objects, but as beings with consciousness, with purpose. That
whether they're animals or trees or plants or other people, it's all
doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, you start to develop
the reality.
Yeah. I mean, you start to develop a different relationship with those things, a different perspective of them, and the realization of that we're all here just simply trying to move along the best way we can. And if that is your perspective, then you have a greater likelihood of speaking up for those little things that can't vocalize. And you start to see the world a little more holistically and see it in a way that that's less of a thing that is extracted. Right? There's a lot of extraction conversations. The value of the hill, the value of the water source, the value of these things versus, I mean, the value of the hill is being a hill. The value of the water source is the water. Like, why do we need to put a dollar amount on it for it to have value? That's a very human 3D limited perspective.
Yeah, and a way to capitalize for the self on it.
That's right. And then the conversation goes into, well, they're, like the factory farm animals don't have feelings. Which then starts to separate us effectively from this conversation we're having and from the greater entity known as nature, when the reality is we're not this little circle down here called humans next to a really big circle called nature. We're this little circle called humans within this bigger circle called nature. Yeah. And until we can live that way, and be aware of that, we're going to see some nasty things.
Yeah, the difference between an indigenous perspective versus, like the modern society.
That's it.
So let me ask you this then. Really what we're talking about here is the role that animals have to play in personal development. And so you've been in personal development for quite a while, and then this animal communication thing opened up. What has that done for your personal development? What has that done for you and your, having this new ability? And I know a big part of it was just like, shit, now I got to tell people. I got to tell people I'm Dr. Doolittle, and I hear animals and they talk to me and they say words. And like, I know that was a huge overcoming, of just like, shit, like this is who I am and I got to admit it. I got to come out of the closet. We did an episode on that a while back. Yeah. But beyond that, what is, and I mean, you can include that in it, but what is this whole thing done for you in your personal development? Yeah.
I think that first piece is still, I don't know if I don't think there's ever going to be a time where everyone goes, oh, that makes sense, Nick. Right? Like that's not going to happen. And so there's always this stand in your light aspect of it all. Right? This is my reality and I've accepted it and I'm willing to stand here and say it repeatedly and people will come closer or they're going to run away or something.
And talk about it like it's normal, because for me, it's starting to be.
That's right. Yeah. For me, it's just as real as the weather. Like, I want to talk about it like it's the weather, right? The other part of it, and this has been wonderful, is, I get to talk to these little critters, and the things they have to say. I mean, it's mind blowing what some of them have to say. Some of it's just as easy as, and it's mind blowing to go like, you got to change your job, right? Like the awareness of that little animal to say those things is incredible. But then there's sometimes like there's a perspective that they give, that they share, that is like you would have to pay for that someplace. Like you'd have to spend a large amount of money in a college institution for someone with highly credentialed individual at the top of the class.
Probably won't get it.
Right. And the thing about it when the animals say it, at least for me, is, and this is the same thing with when you're walking out in nature and it's quiet and you get the hit, or when you're with plant medicine and you get the hit, or whatever meditation, whatever it may be, is there's a certain energetic push that comes with it, signal that comes with it, meaning that comes with it. So it lands in a way that is way more meaningful than had you been in that class with 100 other kids with that professor. It's way more meaningful. It's way more truthful, at least at my perspective.
So the insight into the guidance that has helped you understand the greater working of things and your role in it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And so, like, really seeing the time on the planet, it's very important. Everything comes back to this. Everything comes back to, like, this is really the only thing that matters. Like what we do and how we do it. It's the only thing that really matters. But knowing how best to navigate it from that place that some people believe, some people don't. That's now the reality for me and the animals. But when you get that information from that place and then can apply it to walking on the planet, it's it gives context and a different texture.
Yeah, how you want to show up here and what's important, like
to the everyday events. Yeah, it's all the difference in that son of a bitch cut me off today. Go F yourself, right? Versus some guy cut me off. I had to slow down. Maybe there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Everything's here to support me. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the things that happens for me a lot when I'm channeling for a client is if it's really relevant to me, I'll get this very clear feeling like almost like my guides are going, pay attention, this is for you too. I mean, exactly like that. That's really what they say. I feel like I get this tap on the shoulder and they go, this isn't just for your client. Like, listen to what you're saying right now. And do you get that too when you're working with animals where sometimes when you're sharing for a client, they go, listen up, bud, because this wisdom's for you too.
I don't necessarily get the tap on the shoulder, but I feel myself going, oh, right? Like I feel me taking that, whatever I'm saying, and there's a little piece of me recognizing, very similar to what you're saying, but recognizing that, oh shit, like this is just as applicable to me in some way, as it is to the individual I'm talking to.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating. We could go on, and I'm sure we'll do more episodes with this, but so interesting how it animal communication is personal development, right? It's when we're intertwined with something, we're just as big a part of this as they are, and so when we want them to shift or want them to whatever, it's like we're one of the moving parts in it. In fact,
Absolutely.
Probably the most influential moving part in it. And so, I love what you're doing with this. And, I think I shared on here, I got one of the downloads for the new tools. Your cat, Chucky, hopped up on your lap one day when we were talking and helped me understand one of the tools and brought it in. And I'm like, shit, like, now I have to admit that some of this came from a cat. I was like, I had so much sympathy for, like, I'm like, come on, Nick, like, this is your reality. You got to share it. And then I'm like, now I got to tell people too. Like, it was a lot easier when it was Nick's problem, but and it was awesome. Like what Chucky shared, it just made so much sense, and I'm like, awesome. And I'm like, now I got to credit the cat. Okay, how do I do that? You just do it.
Just do it. Awesome.
It was so good, so good. Well, thanks for sharing all this, and I'm sure the conversation will continue.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Absolutely. Everyone, have a great week. We hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast. And if you did, please subscribe so you can catch the next episode. If you want to learn more about the Aligned Living System and how it could support you in your life, check out davidwaldas.com.